At the Chicago Historical Society's archives, librarian Dr. Rebecca Taylor was digitizing a collection of early 20th century photographs donated by the estate of socialite Eleanor Van Bergen, who had passed away in 2021 at the age of 102. Among the hundreds of images documenting Chicago's upper-class society during the 1920s was one photograph that would soon capture the attention of historians studying the era's darker hidden realities. The black and white photograph, dated June 15, 1920, in elegant script on its reverse, showed what appeared to be a delightful scene from a wealthy family's summer garden party. The central focus was a young girl, approximately 8 years old, captured in a moment of pure joy as she laughed while playing in an elaborate garden setting behind a magnificent Lakeshore Drive mansion. According to the accompanying documentation, the child was identified as little Catherine Pemberton, age 8, at the family's annual summer celebration. The Pemberton name was well known among Chicago's elite. The family had made their fortune in steel manufacturing and real estate development during the city's rapid expansion following the Great Chicago Fire. The photograph displayed the technical excellence typical of professional society photography from that era. The composition was carefully arranged to showcase both the child's innocent happiness and the family's obvious prosperity. Manicured gardens, elegant outdoor furniture, and the impressive mansion visible in the background all spoke of considerable wealth and social status. The image seemed to perfectly capture the carefree spirit of childhood among Chicago's privileged class during the prosperous post-World War I period. Catherine's genuine laughter and animated pose suggested a moment of spontaneous joy, the kind of precious memory that wealthy families commissioned professional photographers to preserve. However, as Dr. Taylor used high-resolution scanning equipment to digitize the photograph for the Historical Society's online archive, something in the lower right corner of the image caught her attention. What had initially appeared to be garden shadows or decorative elements seemed, under closer examination, to contain disturbing details that were completely inconsistent with a joyful children's party. Under digital magnification, the seemingly innocent garden party photograph revealed details in its lower right corner that immediately alarmed Dr. Taylor. What she had initially assumed were shadows from garden furniture or decorative elements appeared instead to be human figures and positions suggesting extreme distress or violence. The corner of the photograph, partially obscured by the garden's elaborate landscaping, showed what appeared to be at least 2 adult figures lying on the ground in unnatural positions. The bodies seemed to be motionless, with dark stains visible on their clothing that suggested blood or other bodily fluids. Most disturbing was the apparent presence of a third figure standing over the prone bodies, holding what looked like a blunt instrument or weapon. The standing figure's posture suggested someone in the act of violence or just having completed a violent act, completely at odds with the festive garden party atmosphere captured in the rest of the photograph. Dr. Taylor consulted with the Historical Society's photographic authentication expert, Dr. James Morton, who confirmed that the disturbing elements were original components of the 1920 photograph, not later additions or photographic artifacts. The lighting, grain structure, and chemical composition are all consistent with a single exposure taken in 1920, Dr. Morton explained. The technical analysis revealed that the photographer had been focused on capturing Catherine's joyful moment and had apparently not noticed, or had chosen to ignore, the violent scene occurring in the background corner of his composition. The depth of field and focal length suggested that the photographer's attention was entirely devoted to the child in the foreground. The discovery raised immediate questions about what had been happening at the Pemberton family's garden party, while little Catherine played innocently just yards away from what appeared to be a multiple murder scene. The contrast between the child's pure happiness and the apparent violence in the corner created a deeply disturbing juxtaposition. The evidence suggested that Catherine had been photographed laughing and playing while serious crimes were being committed in the same location, preserved accidentally in a corner of what was meant to be a charming family photograph. Dr. Taylor's investigation into the Pemberton family revealed a steel and real estate empire built on ruthless business practices and connections to Chicago's notoriously corrupt political machine during the early 1920s. Robert Pemberton, Catherine's father, had expanded the family's wealth dramatically following World War I, through contracts with city government and private development projects. Historical records from the Chicago Municipal Archives showed that Pemberton Steel had secured numerous lucrative contracts for public works projects during the post-war Reconstruction period. However, these contracts had often been awarded under circumstances that attracted scrutiny from reform-minded politicians and journalists. The Chicago Tribune's archives contained several articles from 1919 and early 1920 describing investigations into bid rigging and corruption in city contracting processes. A February 1920 article specifically mentioned concerns about Pemberton Steel's unusually favorable contract terms and the company's close relationships with municipal decision-makers. Of particular significance was a series of articles published by investigative journalist Thomas Mitchell of the Chicago Daily News, who had been documenting connections between major contractors and organized crime figures who controlled various aspects of the city's construction industry. Mitchell's reporting had identified Robert Pemberton as a key figure in a network of businessmen who used intimidation and violence to eliminate competition for municipal contracts. His articles described a system where rival contractors were threatened, sabotaged, or physically attacked to ensure that preferred companies received lucrative city work. Most troubling were Mitchell's reports about contractors and business competitors who had simply disappeared after challenging the established system. His June 10, 1920 article, published just 5 days before the garden party photograph was taken, described the recent disappearances of 2 small contractors who had attempted to bid against Pemberton Steel for a major bridge construction project. Samuel Klein and Michael O'Reilly, both experienced contractors with excellent reputations, have not been seen since submitting competitive bids for the Michigan Avenue Bridge project, Mitchell wrote. Family members report that both men received threatening messages in the days before their disappearance. The timing of these disappearances, occurring just days before Catherine's photograph was taken, suggested a possible connection between the missing contractors and the violent scene captured in the corner of the garden party image. Investigation into the disappearances of Samuel Klein and Michael O'Reilly revealed a pattern of systematic elimination of business competitors that had been operating with apparent impunity throughout Chicago's construction industry during the early 1920s. Police records and family testimonies painted a picture of organized intimidation that frequently escalated to murder. Chicago Police Department files, archived at the city's municipal records facility, contained detailed missing persons reports for both contractors. Klein, a German immigrant who had built a successful small construction company, had last been seen leaving his office on June 12, 1920, after receiving what his secretary described as an urgent business appointment. O'Reilly, an Irish-American contractor who specialized in bridge and infrastructure work, had disappeared on June 13, 1920, after telling his wife he was meeting with potential business associates about a major project opportunity. Both men had left behind thriving businesses and families who immediately suspected foul play. Detective Lieutenant Patrick Hayes, who had investigated both disappearances, filed reports expressing his belief that the men had been murdered to eliminate competition for the Michigan Avenue Bridge contract. However, Hayes' investigation had been hampered by what he described as unusual interference from senior department officials. Hayes' confidential memo to Police Chief William Russell, dated June 18, 1920, stated, "Evidence strongly suggests that Klein and O'Reilly were eliminated to ensure Pemberton Steel's success in securing the bridge contract. Witnesses report both men received threats prior to their disappearance, and their families believe they were murdered." The detective's memo continued, "Investigation has been constrained by directives from City Hall regarding sensitivity of municipal contracting relationships. Request permission to expand investigation into connections between Pemberton organization and recent contractor disappearances." Chief Russell's response, also preserved in the archives, denied Hayes' request and ordered him to close both cases due to lack of concrete evidence and higher priority investigations. The cases were officially classified as missing persons rather than suspected homicides. Family members of both missing contractors had hired private investigators, but these efforts had also been frustrated by what appeared to be systematic obstruction from official sources and intimidation of potential witnesses. Analysis of the June 15, 1920 garden party guest list and contemporary accounts revealed that the Pemberton family's summer celebration had been attended by many of Chicago's most powerful political and business figures, providing perfect cover for conducting violent business while maintaining an appearance of social respectability. The guest list, preserved in Eleanor Van Bergen's social papers, included Mayor William Hale Thompson, several city aldermen, judges, police officials, and prominent contractors who comprised Chicago's construction industry elite. The gathering had been designed to celebrate recent business successes and strengthen political relationships. However, contemporary accounts from servants and staff who worked at the Pemberton mansion that day told a different story about what had occurred during the seemingly festive garden party. Testimony recorded by private investigators hired by the families of missing contractors revealed disturbing details about the event. Maria Gonzalez, who worked as a housemaid for the Pemberton family, later told investigators that she had observed unusual business meetings taking place in areas of the garden away from the main party activities. She reported seeing Robert Pemberton and several associates leading two men toward a secluded area of the property during the afternoon. James Murphy, the family's groundskeeper, described hearing sounds of distress from the garden's far corner while he was maintaining equipment in the service area. According to his statement, he had been warned by Pemberton's security personnel to avoid certain areas of the property during the party. Most significantly, photographer William Hayes, who had been hired to document the family celebration, later reported that he had been specifically instructed to focus his camera work on designated areas and to avoid photographing certain sections of the garden where private business discussions were taking place. Hayes's professional notes, discovered decades later among his archived materials, revealed his growing discomfort during the assignment. Mr. Pemberton was unusually specific about camera positioning and requested that I focus exclusively on family members and approved guests. I was repeatedly directed away from the garden's eastern section. The photographer's account suggested that the violent scene captured in the corner of Catherine's photograph had been the result of his camera equipment being positioned to avoid that area, accidentally including the edge of whatever was happening in the supposedly restricted zone. Investigation into the broader corruption network that protected Robert Pemberton's criminal activities revealed a sophisticated system involving Chicago's political machine, law enforcement, and judicial system during the early 1920s. The Pemberton organization had effectively purchased immunity from legal consequences through systematic bribery and intimidation. Financial records discovered in the Chicago Municipal Archives showed that Pemberton Steel had made substantial consulting payments to numerous city officials, judges, and police administrators during the period when contractors were disappearing. These payments, often disguised as legitimate business expenses, totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. Mayor Thompson's administration had been particularly cooperative with Pemberton's interests, providing favorable contract terms and ensuring that investigations into missing contractors received minimal resources or attention. The mayor's personal financial records, subpoenaed during later federal corruption investigations, showed significant deposits from sources connected to Pemberton Enterprises. Police Department internal memos revealed that Detective Hayes's investigation into the missing contractors had been deliberately sabotaged by senior officials who had received instructions to limit the scope and duration of the inquiries. Captain Thomas Brennan, Hayes's supervisor, had filed confidential reports stating that political considerations require careful handling of contractor disappearance cases. The judicial system had also been compromised through Pemberton's influence. Several judges who handled cases involving construction industry disputes had received substantial financial support for their political campaigns and personal investments from companies connected to the Pemberton network. Most significantly, the Cook County Coroner's Office had been instructed to classify any human remains discovered in connection with contractor disappearances as accidental deaths or deaths by unknown causes, rather than conducting thorough homicide investigations. This comprehensive corruption network ensured that even when evidence of Pemberton's crimes was discovered, it was either suppressed, destroyed, or misclassified to prevent successful prosecution. The garden party photograph represented one of the few pieces of evidence that had escaped this systematic cover-up. The violent scene captured in the corner of Little Catherine's photograph had been protected from investigation by the same network that allowed Pemberton to eliminate business competitors with complete impunity. William Hayes's complete professional archives, discovered in his former studio's storage facility, revealed the moral struggle he had faced after accidentally capturing evidence of murder during what was supposed to be a routine society photography assignment. His personal correspondence and business records documented his growing awareness of what he had photographed and his fear of the consequences of speaking out. Hayes's journal entry from June 16, 1920, the day after the garden party, revealed his immediate realization of what his camera had captured. Upon developing yesterday's photographs from the Pemberton celebration, I discovered that my camera angle had inadvertently included activities occurring in the restricted area of the garden. The images show what appears to be violence against individuals who may be the missing contractors reported in recent newspapers. The photographer's subsequent entries documented his internal conflict between professional discretion and moral obligation. The images clearly show what appears to be murder occurring during a social gathering attended by the city's most powerful individuals. However, my position as society photographer depends upon maintaining absolute confidentiality about my client's private affairs. Hayes had apparently consulted with his lawyer about the legal implications of possessing such evidence. His attorneys, written advice preserved in Hayes's files, warned that attempting to use photographic evidence against clients of Mr. Pemberton's stature could result in serious personal and professional consequences, including potential charges of extortion or blackmail. Most revealing was Hayes's correspondence with his brother in New York, dated June 25, 1920. I find myself in possession of evidence that could expose serious crimes committed by some of Chicago's most powerful individuals. However, I am also aware that my survival depends upon maintaining silence about what I have accidentally documented. Hayes had ultimately decided to deliver the requested photographs to the Pemberton family while secretly retaining copies of the images that showed the violent scene. His business records showed that he had been paid substantially more than his usual fee for the garden party assignment, suggesting that the family was aware of what he had captured and was paying for his silence. The photographer's files contained evidence that he had been under surveillance following the garden party, with private investigators apparently monitoring his activities and communications to ensure he did not attempt to use the photographs against the Pemberton family. Forensic analysis using modern digital enhancement techniques allowed investigators to identify specific details in the corner of the garden party photograph that confirmed the violent scene had indeed involved Samuel Klein and Michael O'Reilly, the missing contractors. The enhanced images provided sufficient detail to match physical descriptions and clothing documented in the missing persons reports. Dr. Sarah Kim, a specialist in forensic image analysis at the FBI's laboratory, used advanced computer algorithms to clarify details that had been obscured by shadow and distance in the original 1920 photograph. The enhanced images revealed facial features, clothing patterns, and physical characteristics that corresponded exactly with descriptions provided by the contractors' families. Klein could be identified by his distinctive watch chain and the specific pattern of his business suit, both of which had been described in detail by his wife when she filed the missing person report. O'Reilly was recognizable by his characteristic red hair and the work boots he typically wore to business meetings, details that his family had specifically mentioned to police investigators. The enhanced imagery also revealed additional horrifying details about the method of their murder. Both men appeared to have been beaten with blunt instruments, consistent with the improvised weapons that would have been available at a garden party setting. The positioning of their bodies suggested they had been attacked simultaneously or in rapid succession. Most disturbing was the identification of the standing figure, who appeared to be responsible for the violence. Digital enhancement revealed enough facial detail to suggest this was Robert Pemberton himself, personally overseeing or participating in the elimination of his business competitors. The analysis also revealed evidence of other individuals in the background who appeared to be assisting with or witnessing the murders. These figures could be partially identified as known associates of Pemberton who had been documented in police surveillance reports as suspected enforcers for his organization. The forensic evidence confirmed that the garden party had been used as cover for the systematic elimination of contractors who threatened Pemberton Steel's monopoly on municipal construction projects. The innocent family celebration had provided perfect cover for multiple murders occurring just yards from where Chicago's political elite were socializing. Despite the clear photographic evidence of the 1920 murders, the passage of time had made traditional prosecution impossible. However, Dr. Taylor's discovery prompted modern law enforcement agencies to officially recognize the crimes and provide closure for the victims' descendants who had spent a century seeking answers about their ancestors' disappearances. The Chicago Police Department formally reopened the Klein and O'Reilly cases as historical homicides, using the photographic evidence to officially reclassify their disappearances as confirmed murders. This recognition allowed their families to finally obtain death certificates and access legal remedies that had been denied for over a century. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office issued a formal statement acknowledging that the systematic corruption of the 1920s had prevented proper investigation of these crimes, and expressing regret for the institutional failures that had allowed the murders to remain officially unsolved. The Illinois Attorney General's office used the case to launch a broader investigation into historical corruption in Chicago's construction industry, identifying patterns of violence and intimidation that had shaped the city's development during the early 20th century. Samuel Klein's grandson, who had spent decades researching his grandfather's disappearance, expressed relief at finally having confirmation of what his family had always believed. "We knew grandfather had been murdered for refusing to be intimidated by corrupt contractors. Having photographic proof validates everything our family endured while seeking the truth." Michael O'Reilly's great-niece, who had maintained family records documenting his disappearance, established a memorial fund for victims of historical business violence. The fund supports research into similar cases and provides resources for families seeking information about relatives who disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The photograph was placed on permanent display at the Chicago History Museum as part of an exhibition on hidden violence in Chicago's development. The display includes context about the systematic corruption that characterized the city's construction industry during the 1920s and the human cost of unchecked political and business corruption. The image of Catherine's innocent laughter, forever juxtaposed with evidence of her father's crimes, serves as a powerful symbol of how violence and corruption can operate beneath the surface of apparent respectability and prosperity. 30 years after Dr. Taylor first examined the garden party photograph, the image has become one of the most significant pieces of evidence documenting systematic business violence during Chicago's development in the early 20th century. The photograph serves as proof that organized crime and political corruption had penetrated the highest levels of the city's business and social establishment. The Chicago Historical Society has established the Klein O'Reilly Research Collection, housing documents related to business violence and political corruption during the 1920s. Researchers from universities worldwide use these materials to study the intersection of organized crime, political corruption, and urban development. Modern construction industry organizations have adopted the case as a symbol of the importance of ethical business practices and transparent bidding processes. Professional associations use the Klein O'Reilly murders as examples of how competition eliminates innovation and fair pricing when violence replaces legitimate business competition. The forensic techniques developed to analyze the garden party photograph have been applied to numerous other historical images, leading to the discovery of additional evidence of concealed crimes and institutional cover-ups throughout Chicago's development period. Law enforcement agencies now routinely examine family photographs and social documentation from the early 20th century as potential sources of evidence for historical crimes, recognizing that criminal activity often occurred in settings that appeared completely innocent. Dr. Taylor, now director of the Chicago Historical Society's Crime Documentation Project, continues investigating hidden evidence of historical violence preserved in photographic collections. Her work has identified dozens of similar cases where family and social photographs inadvertently captured evidence of serious crimes. For contemporary audiences, the image of Catherine's laughter serves as a haunting reminder of how childhood, Innocence can exist alongside systematic violence, and how the most joyful moments can be forever tainted by hidden crimes occurring just outside the frame. The photograph that was meant to preserve a moment of family happiness has instead preserved evidence of multiple murders, ensuring that Samuel Klein and Michael O'Reilly's deaths will not be forgotten, and that the truth about Chicago's violent development will remain visible for future generations. Catherine Pemberton, who died in 1995 without ever knowing what her father had done or what had been captured in her childhood photograph, had unknowingly served as the innocent witness to crimes that shaped her city's development. Her joyful laughter, preserved in the moment before she could understand the evil surrounding her, became a symbol of how corruption and violence can operate behind facades of prosperity and respectability. The corner of the photograph that accidentally captured evidence of murder has ensured that the victims of Chicago's systematic business violence finally received the recognition and justice that had been denied to them for over a century.